At the party I funded, my sister got a $450,000 historic home. I got a crusted blender. I stood quietly. Then Dad said, "You have money. Your sister needs security." I shut it all down. They just called me Penny, the boring, pragmatic daughter. The emotionless ATM. The one who appeared, wrote checks, and vanished back into her spreadsheets without complaint. They forgot that I was a forensic accountant who specialized in dismantling sophisticated financial fraud schemes. I had traced money through 17 offshore shell companies to catch untouchable embezzlers. I saw patterns where others saw chaos, and right now, the pattern of disrespect was impossible to ignore. I was standing in the middle of the ballroom at the historic inn, holding a cardboard box taped together so haphazardly that one corner was already splitting open. The air in the room, thick with the scent of French catering and expensive champagne, suddenly felt cold. Inside the box was a blender. Not just any blender, but the exact same one I had given my mother 4 years ago as a thoughtful housewarming gift when they downsized. Now it was filthy. The power cord was crusted with what looked like dried coffee stains. The plastic pitcher was cloudy and scratched. Someone had stuffed a Starbucks gift card inside, and when I pulled it out to check the balance, it mocked me $15. $15. 10 feet away. My 29-year-old sister, Fallon, was literally screaming with joy. I mean that high, pitched squeal that could make dogs bark 3 blocks away. She was jumping up and down in her new, overpriced athleisure outfit, waving a document above her head like she had just won the lottery. That document was a quitclaim deed to the historic carriage house. The one made of original red brick, with oak hardwood floors and beautiful arched windows. The one located in the most expensive district in our city, valued at $450,000. The one our grandparents had left to the family trust, completely paid off. And my parents had just signed it over to her. Just now, in front of 50 guests at their 35th wedding anniversary party. The party I had paid $3,000 to throw. I'm going to turn it into my yoga sanctuary. Fallon shrieked, clutching the deed to her chest. A healing space. I can already see the Instagram aesthetic. My mother, Marcella, turned to me then, wearing the $2,000 pearl necklace I had given her last Christmas. She gave me that smile. The smile that looked warm and maternal to everyone else, but felt like a blade twisting when it was directed at me. "Penny, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with condescension masked as affection. "You're so practical. You don't need these artistic, soulful things. That blender still works fine. I tested it last week, and the gift card is for your lats." I stared at the crusted power cord in my hands. She had not even bothered to clean it. My father, Royce, adjusted the silk Hermes tie I had given him for Father's Day and nodded sagely. "You make plenty of money, Penny. You can buy whatever you want. Your sister is sensitive. She needs asset security. Stability. You understand." I understood perfectly. I understood that I had arranged the flowers, booked the venue, hired the jazz quartet, ordered the $40 per person catering, and coordinated the entire celebration. My real gift, the one currently sitting unopened on the gift table, was a $5,000 check toward the European River cruise they had been talking about for years. The humiliation was a physical wave, rising from my stomach and settling cold on my heart. This public, brazen validation of the family hierarchy. The functional daughter receives junk. The favored daughter receives an estate, was the summation of a lifetime of disrespect. I looked at my fiancé, Sterling, across the room. He was a corporate lawyer, 6'2", with the kind of steady presence that always made me feel safe. His gray eyes met mine, and he offered a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent question, "Do we have to take this?" No, not anymore. Something inside me, Something that had been bending and bending for 33 years finally snapped. Not broke, but snapped. When something snaps, it becomes a weapon. I placed the dirty blender box on the gift table with deliberate care, careful not to disturb the unopened check for the river cruise. Then, I pulled out my phone. The jazz quartet was finishing a mellow rendition of Fly Me to the Moon. I called the catering company. Hi, this is Penny Kingsley. I need to cancel the payment authorization for tonight's event. Yes. I know the party is happening right now. I am revoking my credit card authorization. Immediately, my mother's face went white. Penny, what are you? I held up one finger and called the venue coordinator. Same thing. I am canceling my payment. The party hosts will need to settle the bill themselves. Thank you. The room went completely silent. The jazz quartet stopped playing mid-note. I looked at my parents, who were staring at me in horrified disbelief. I looked at Fallon, who was still clutching her deed, her celebratory grin fading into confusion. I turned and walked towards Sterling, picking up my purse and coat from the chair where I had left them. You okay? Sterling murmured as we moved quickly toward the exit. I'm free, I said. And I meant it. That was the moment I stopped being their ATM. I walked out of the historic inn and did not look back, leaving the chaos, the stunned silence, and the enormous, unpaid bill behind me. 18 months of blessed silence passed since I walked out of that anniversary party. 18 months of not speaking to my parents or my sister. No calls, no texts, no awkward family dinners where I had to smile and pretend everything was fine while being treated like a convenient bank account with legs. It was 18 months spent building my life exactly the way I wanted it. Sterling and I bought a penthouse downtown. 2,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows and modern design, with a view of the city skyline that made every morning feel like victory. We furnished it ourselves, choosing every piece together. No guilt-laden family heirlooms, just clean lines and space that belonged entirely to us. My career flourished. I made senior director at my firm 6 months ago, leading the most complex fraud investigations in the region. My income increased by 40%. I had been featured in 2 industry publications for my work dismantling a healthcare billing scheme that had been running for 7 years. I was thriving. But I would be lying if I said I never thought about them. Not because I missed them, absolutely not. Because I am a forensic accountant, and once you train your brain to spot patterns, you cannot turn it off. It becomes reflex like breathing. So, when I occasionally checked public records, property tax filings, business registrations, municipal violations, I told myself it was just professional habit. Due diligence, keeping my skills sharp. I was checking for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities. It was not personal, it was professional. It was an audit. That is how I found the gold mine. It started innocently enough. I was having coffee one Saturday morning, Sterling still asleep in our bedroom, and I pulled up the county property database on my laptop. Just curious, I told myself. Just wondering what Fallon had actually done with that $450,000 gift. The answer, according to her occasionally checked public Instagram through a fake account, was absolutely nothing productive. In the first month after the party, she posted exactly 3 carefully staged photos inside the carriage house, captioned with nonsense about finding her inner goddess and creating sacred space. Then the posts stopped. Instead, her feed filled up with party pictures. The carriage house was not a healing sanctuary. It was a venue for wine nights with her equally unemployed friends. There were photos of string lights hung haphazardly across the original timber beams. There was a video of Fallon and 3 friends dancing on the porch at 2 in the morning, disturbing every neighbor on that quiet, expensive street. But the Instagram feed was just entertainment. The real discovery came from the city database. The historic district designation does not just sound fancy. It comes with strict legal requirements. When you own property in that zone, you are a custodian of architectural history. There are rules about exterior maintenance, paint colors, and even the height of your grass. Violations come with penalties. Steep ones. I pulled up the property record for the carriage house address and felt my pulse quicken as line after line of violation notices loaded on my screen. Violation 847, HG failure to maintain landscaping to code standards. Front lawn grass exceeds 8 inches in height. Fine. $500 per day until corrected. Violation 653, HG exterior wooden window frames showing visible rot and peeling paint. Failure to restore using historically approved paint colors. Fine $500 per day until corrected. Violation 209, HG. Removal of original storm shutters without proper permits. Fine $1,000 per day until shutters restored or alternative approved. I sat back in my chair, coffee forgotten, and did the math. The first violation was dated 8 months ago. The window frame violation started 6 months ago. The shutter issue was 4 months old. $500 per day for 240 days. That was $120,000. $500 per day for 180 days. That was $90,000. $1,000 per day for 120 days. That was another $120,000. Plus, I found a separate lien for unpaid property taxes, accruing interest on the $18,000 Fallon, of course, had not paid. The numbers danced in my head like music. With the accruing interest and administrative fees, we were looking at roughly $350,000 in municipal liens on a property, worth $450,000. I pulled up the violation notices themselves. They had all been mailed to the carriage house, address via certified letters. According to the tracking information, they had been delivered but never signed for. Fallon either did not know she was being fined, or more likely, she had seen the official looking envelopes and ignored them, the way she ignores anything that requires adult responsibility. The city had placed a priority lien on the property 4 weeks ago. That lien sits above all other claims, even a mortgage if there were one. It means the city gets paid first, before anyone else, if the property is sold or foreclosed. I sat there in my beautiful penthouse, sunlight streaming through the windows, and smiled. Because here is what Fallon and my parents do not understand about the world. Debt does not disappear because you ignore it. It grows. It compounds. It becomes something alive and hungry. And the city does not care about your feelings or your potential or your healing journey. The city wants its money. I spent the next 2 weeks researching municipal lien purchases. It is legal. It is powerful. Once a private investor owns the lien, they have extraordinary power to foreclose or force a sale. They can make someone's life very, very difficult. I formed the LLC on a Tuesday. MARCLC, standing for Municipal Asset Recovery Services. Registered in Delaware for privacy, with a local agent address that could not be traced back to me. It sounded boring, bureaucratic, and completely official. On a Monday, I called the city's revenue department. I am interested in purchasing the municipal liens on a property in the historic district. I said, all business, no emotion. What is the process? 3 days later, after paperwork and a wire transfer of $348,750, every penny of accumulated fines, penalties, interest, and unpaid taxes, I owned the debt. The carriage house my sister had been given, the asset worth $450,000 that was supposed to provide her with security, was now effectively mine. She just did not know it yet. I told Sterling that night, showing him the documentation over dinner. He studied the papers, his lawyer brain processing the implications, and then looked up at me with something like awe. You bought your sister's debt, he stated. I bought the city's debt, I corrected. My sister just happens to be the one who owes it. She is going to lose the house. Only if she cannot pay me back $348,750, plus the interest I am legally entitled to charge as the lien holder. Sterling laughed then, shaking his head. They really have no idea what they did, do they? Giving a $500,000 asset to someone who cannot even remember to pay property taxes. No. I agreed, refilling my wine glass. They have no idea. I was not ready to make my move yet. This was not about revenge in the hot, impulsive sense. This was about strategic consequence. About teaching a lesson that would actually be learned. So I waited. I watched the carriage house deteriorate further, through public records and occasional drive-bys. I let the trap sit there, perfectly constructed, ready to spring. Because I knew with the certainty that comes from 33 years of being underestimated, that eventually, they would need me again. They always needed me again. And when they came calling, I would be ready. Not with a checkbook this time. With consequences. The call that finally broke the 18 months of silence came on a Wednesday evening. Sterling and I were cooking dinner together. He was handling the pasta while I prepped a salad, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach tighten. Aunt Ramona. She was my father's younger sister, and the only person in my extended family who had ever acknowledged that the way my parents treated me was fundamentally wrong. She rarely called, usually just to check in, to remind me I was not crazy for keeping my distance. I answered on speaker. Hey, Aunt Ramona. Penny. Honey. Her voice was tight with stress. I'm at City Hospital. Your father is in the emergency room. My hand froze over the cutting board. Sterling looked up sharply. What happened? Your mother says it's a heart attack. They brought him in about 40 minutes ago. She is not handling it well. She asked me to call you. Of course she did. Mom would never call me directly. That would require admitting she needed me. Is he stable? I asked, my forensic accountant brain automatically organizing the situation into facts and data points. The doctors are running tests now. Penny, I think you should come. Whatever has happened between you and your parents, if something happens to your father, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I said, and ended the call. Sterling had already turned off the stove. I'm driving. You do not have to? Penny. He took my face in his hands, his gray eyes serious. I'm driving. You are shaking. I looked down at my hands and realized he was right. They were trembling, not from fear, but from something else entirely. The drive to the hospital should have taken 17 minutes. Sterling made it in 14, navigating evening traffic with the kind of calm competence that reminded me why I was marrying him. But I was not focused on the traffic. I was focused on the trembling in my hands and the memory that trembling had triggered. You know what I'm thinking about? I said suddenly, staring out the window at the city lights blurring past. Sterling reached over and took my hand. Tell me. 3 years ago, August 14th, 2:30 in the morning. My voice sounded flat, detached, like I was reading a case file. I had acute appendicitis. The pain was so intense I could not stand up straight. I was on the floor of my bathroom, trying not to throw up, and I called Mom. Sterling tightened his grip on my hand. I told her I thought my appendix was rupturing. I said I needed help getting to the emergency room. Do you know what she said? She said she could not leave the house. She said Fallon had just broken up with her boyfriend. Some guy she had been dating for 3 weeks. And Fallon was threatening to cut off all her hair. Mom said she could not take her eyes off her for even a minute, because Fallon was having a crisis. The words were coming faster now, a dam breaking after years of pressure. She told me to call an Uber. She said I was capable and strong and I would figure it out. So I did. I called an Uber. And some guy named Marcus drove me to the emergency room while I held a trash bag in my lap. I admitted myself. I signed my own surgical consent forms while the surgeon told me my appendix was close to rupturing. I went into surgery alone. I woke up in recovery alone. Sterling pulled over right there on the side of the road, hazards on, and turned to face me. The next morning, I continued, staring straight ahead. I was lying in my hospital room with an IV in my arm, and I checked Instagram. Because I'm an idiot and I couldn't help myself. And there was a photo Mom had posted at 3 a.m. the night before. Her and Fallon, eating pizza in their pajamas, watching a movie. The caption said, "Heartbreak healing sleepover," with a bunch of heart emojis. Unbelievable. Sterling breathed. She posted a picture of eating pizza with my sister while I was in surgery. Sterling pulled me into his arms then, as much as the car's center console would allow, and I let him hold me even though I was not crying. I was past crying. That required having some grief left. Some hope that things could be different. I had none. "That's why I'm shaking," I said into his shoulder. "Not because I'm afraid Dad is dying, but because 3 years ago I nearly died, and they chose my sister's bad haircut over me. And now Dad has a panic attack. Because I am sure that's what this is, not an actual heart attack. Over some financial stress. And suddenly I'm supposed to come running." Sterling pulled back to look at me, his hands on my shoulders. "You do not have to go in there." "Yes. I do." "Why?" I smiled then, and I could feel how cold it was. "Because they are about to find out that the financial stress is not random bad luck. And I want to see their faces when they realize who has been holding the knife all along." Sterling studied me for a long moment. I waited for him to try to talk me out of it, to take the high road. Instead, he kissed my forehead and said, "Then let's go teach them what consequences look like." We walked into the hospital together, Sterling's hand solid and steady on my back. The automatic doors slid open, bringing the smell of antiseptic and anxiety. The fluorescent lights made everything look washed out, surreal. I knew exactly where to go of the VIP waiting room, 3rd floor. Of course they would be in the VIP section. When the elevator doors opened, I heard my mother's voice first. And she won't even answer her phone. I've called 6 times. 6? After everything we've given her, after we raised her, fed her, paid for her education. Aunt Ramona's voice cut through, tired and firm. "Marcella. Maybe she didn't answer because you haven't spoken to her in 18 months except 2. There she is." Mom had spotted me. She came rushing down the hallway, her cashmere cardigan slightly disheveled, reaching for me like she was going to hug me. I stepped smoothly to the side, letting her momentum carry her past me. Sterling moved subtly to block her from trying again. "How's Dad?" I asked, my voice professionally neutral. "Oh, now you care." Mom's grief transformed instantly into anger. "Now you decide to show up. After abandoning your family for over a year. After humiliating us at our anniversary party. After? Marcella." Dad's voice came from the waiting room doorway. He looked pale but steady, standing on his own 2 feet. "That's enough. Not an actual heart attack, then. Financial stress masquerading as cardiac arrest." I walked past my mother without another word and faced my father. "What did the doctors say?" He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Panic attack. Stress-induced. They want to keep me for observation overnight, but I'm fine." "Good," I said. "Then I'll be going." "Wait," he held up a hand. "We need to talk. About Fallon. About the house." There it was. The real reason for the emergency call. I looked at Aunt Ramona, who gave me a small, apologetic shrug. She had been used as bait, and she knew it. 5 minutes, I said. "In private." Dad nodded and gestured to a smaller consultation room off the main waiting area. Sterling started to follow me, but I squeezed his hand. Wait here. I'll be fine. You sure? I'm sure. This was not about needing protection. This was about watching them walk into the trap I had built. And I wanted to see every second of it with perfect clarity. I followed my father into the consultation room, and Mom rushed in behind us before I could close the door. Typical. The room was small, clinical, and reeked faintly of disinfectant. I remained standing. So, I said, what is the crisis? The silence stretched taut, and I let it. Finally, Mom broke. The house, she said, her voice cracking. Fallon's house. The carriage house. We are going to lose it. I raised an eyebrow. How unfortunate. Unfortunate. Mom's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. Is that all you have to say? Your sister is about to lose everything because of some technicality, some ridiculous city fines, and all you can say is unfortunate. What would you like me to say? That you will help? Yes. That despite our differences. You'll still do the right thing for family. Penny, they're going to foreclose. Some company called Mars Capital bought all the debt. They sent a letter yesterday saying Fallon has 30 days to pay the full amount, or they are taking the house. I felt a thrill run through me. Not guilt, but pure, icy satisfaction. They had received my letter. How much does she owe? I asked, keeping my face carefully neutral. Dad cleared his throat. With the accumulated fines, the property taxes, and the interest this company is charging, it's approximately $348,000. That is quite a bit. The conflict was exactly where I wanted it to be, a demand for money. The stage was set for the next part of the reckoning. It is devastating, Mom said, tears starting to flow now, real ones this time. Not the performative crying she usually reserved for effect. We tried to pay it ourselves, but we do not have that kind of liquid cash. We would have to sell our house, and we are too old to start over, and Fallon certainly does not have it. She has been struggling, trying to find her path. Partying? I corrected calmly. She has been partying. I have seen the Instagram posts. Mom's mouth tightened. She is young. She is figuring things out, but she does not deserve to lose her home because of some bureaucratic nonsense about grass height and paint colors. It is insane that the city can charge so much for. The city is not charging it anymore? I interrupted. Mars Capital is. They bought the debt, and as the new lien holder, they have every legal right to foreclose if the debt is not paid. We know that. Dad snapped, some of his old authoritative tone creeping back. That is why we need you to pay it. The words hung in the stale, clinical air. They just said it. They came here to summon me to fix the crisis they had manufactured. Excuse me, I asked, though I had heard them perfectly. Mom rushed forward. Penny, please. I know we have had our issues. I know you felt hurt by the anniversary gift situation, but surely you can see past that now. This is family. This is your sister's future. You have the money. You have always had money. You make twice what your father made at your age. A few $100,000 is nothing to you. $348,750, I said precisely. Plus ongoing interest accrual. That is not a few $100,000. That is more than most people make in 7 years. But you are not most people. Dad insisted, falling back on his practiced, patriarchal wisdom. You are a Kingsley, and Kingsleys take care of family. Your grandfather would be ashamed if he knew you were letting your sister lose the house he built. The guilt card. The family honor card. I felt nothing. Grandfather's house. I said softly, my voice detached. That you gave to Fallon without even asking me. That you transferred to a 29-year-old with no job, no income, and no ability to maintain it. That you handed over at a party I paid $3,000 to throw, while giving me a dirty blender. We have apologized for that. Mom lied. Have you? Well, we are acknowledging it now, she snapped, her fake sympathy cracking around the edges. "And what do you want, Penny?" "You want us to grovel. To beg. Fine. I am begging. Please help your sister. She is young and foolish, yes. But she does not deserve to be homeless." "She will not be homeless," I pointed out. "She does not live there." Mom's face flushed. "That is not the point." "What is the point, Mom?" I asked. "The point is that you want me to fix the consequences of your terrible decisions. Again. You gave a valuable asset to someone incompetent, and now that incompetence has come due. And instead of letting Fallon face the natural consequences of not paying her property taxes or maintaining her property, you want me to swoop in and make it all disappear." "She is your sister," Dad said. His voice hard now, all pretense of warmth gone. "Family helps family. Family." I repeated, tasting the word like poison. When was the last time this family helped me? When I was in surgery alone. When I needed a down payment on my first apartment. And you said no, because you were funding Fallon's photography business. That lasted 6 weeks. When I graduated top of my class, and you missed the ceremony because Fallon had a yoga retreat? You never needed help, Mom said, and there was actual resentment in her voice. Everything always came so easy to you. School, work, money. You never struggled like Fallon struggles. You do not know what it is like to be coddled. I interrupted. To be enabled. To be given everything and taught nothing. You are right. I do not know what that is like. I know what it is like to earn everything I have while watching my sister get everything for free. Dad's face was reddening. This is getting us nowhere. Penny, bottom line, will you help or not? This was it. The moment of their expectation. They were waiting for me to be the good, accommodating daughter they had always trained me to be. I let the silence stretch, then walked slowly to the door and opened it. "Sterling," I called out. "Could you bring the briefcase?" Mom and Dad exchanged confused looks. Hope flickered across Mom's face. She thought the briefcase meant a checkbook. Sterling appeared in the doorway carrying his leather litigation briefcase, his expression professionally neutral. "Thank you," I said, taking it from him. He squeezed my hand quickly before stepping back into the waiting room, though he left the door open. Aunt Ramona appeared behind him, curiosity clear on her face. I set the briefcase on the small table and opened it with deliberate slowness. "You want my help," I said, focusing on the briefcase locks. "You think I should just write a check for $348,750, plus interest, to save Fallon from her own negligence?" "Yes," Mom breathed. "Yes, exactly. But here is what you do not understand." I pulled out the first document. A printout of all the municipal violations, complete with city inspector photos showing the overgrown yard and the rotting window frames. I have spent 18 months learning exactly how much damage financial irresponsibility can cause. I have watched that house, grandfather's house, deteriorate because Fallon could not be bothered to cut the grass or maintain the window frames. Dad's face went pale as he looked at the images. I have watched her treat a $450,000 asset like a party venue. I continued, pulling out Instagram printouts. Photos of beer cans on the historic porch, videos of friends climbing on the original timber beams. "Where did you get these?" Mom whispered. "Instagram is public, Mom. Anyone can see them." I pulled out the next stack, the property tax records, the violation notices, the escalating fines. Fallon received 17 certified letters from the city. 17 chances to correct the problems before the fines became catastrophic. She ignored all of them. She did not know. Mom started. She did not care. I corrected. There is a difference. And now the bill has come due. I pulled out the final document, the M.A. Ross LLC purchase agreement with the city. "This," I said, laying it carefully on top of the pile, "is the proof that someone bought Fallon's debt from the city 3 months ago. All $348,750 of it. Dad reached for the document, his hands shaking slightly. His eyes scanned the legal text. He stopped breathing. What is it? Mom demanded. But Dad had found it. Right there in the corporate registration documents I had helpfully included. M.A. Ross LLC, Registered Agent Sterling J. Bennett. Officers of the corporation. He looked up at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. You bought the debt. You are M.A. Ross Capital. Mom's face went through confusion, realization, and then horror. You are foreclosing on your own sister. Her voice was shrill enough to carry into the waiting room. I am not foreclosing on anyone, I said calmly. I am simply the lien holder. Fallon can pay the debt, and the house is hers to keep. She just needs to come up with $348,750 plus the ongoing interest that accrues at the legally allowable rate of 12% per annum. That is over $40,000 a year in interest alone. Dad whispered. Yes, I said. That is how debt works. This is insane, Mom said, her voice rising. You are destroying your sister out of spite. Over a blender. No. Mom, I smiled. This is not about the blender. The blender was just the moment I realized who you people really are. This is about consequences. Natural. Legal. Appropriate consequences for 18 months of negligence and entitlement. So you are just going to take the house? Dad stated flatly. I do not want the house. I want Fallon to pay her debts like an adult. She cannot. Then she will lose the house. That is how it works when you do not pay your bills. You evil, ungrateful, Mom started. Actually, I interrupted. I am prepared to make an offer. They both froze. I reached into the briefcase one more time and pulled out a settlement agreement Sterling had prepared. I will forgive the debt entirely, I said. Well, $348,750. Fallon keeps the house, free and clear. And I will transfer the land. Release documents as soon as this agreement is executed. Hope blazed across both their faces. However, I continued. Holding up the agreement, there are conditions. First, Mom and Dad, you will pay me back the $80,000 you have borrowed from me over the years. Every emergency loan, every time you asked me to cover something. I have records of every transaction. That payment is due within 90 days. Mom's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Second, I continued, holding the signed agreement clearly in view. You will sell your house, your primary residence, and use the proceeds to pay me that $80,000, plus pay off your own debts. I know you are underwater on your credit cards and behind on your own property taxes. You will use the remaining money to move into something you can actually afford. A rental, perhaps. Something modest. You cannot be serious, Dad said. I am extremely serious. You gave away a $450,000 asset to someone who could not maintain it while asking me to fund your retirement. Those decisions have consequences. You will downsize, pay your debts, and live within your means like everyone else in the world. And if we refuse? Mom asked, her voice venomous. I shrugged. Then I foreclose on Fallon in 30 days, take the house, and sell it at auction. I will probably net around $400,000 after fees. And you will still owe me the $80,000 I can pursue through civil court. Plus, you will have a daughter who is homeless and unemployable. Your choice. Dad was reading the agreement now, his lawyer's eyes catching every detail. This also requires Fallon to get a job, he said. Any job. Within 60 days. Yes. I confirmed. She needs to demonstrate that she is capable of supporting herself like an adult. The job just has to be documented. Employment taxes, pay stubs, the works. She will never agree to this, Mom said, aghast. Then she will never get to keep the house. Those are the terms. I placed the agreement on the table between us, along with a pen. You have 48 hours to decide, I said. Sign this, execute the terms, and everyone moves forward. Refuse, and I move forward with foreclosure. Sterling will be waiting in the hallway to answer any legal questions you might have. I picked up my purse and turned toward the door. Penny, Dad said, his voice strange. When did you become this cold? I looked back at him, at both of them, sitting in that sterile consultation room, surrounded by evidence of all their failures. I am not cold, I said quietly. I am just done being warm for people who would rather burn me for heat than build their own fire. And I walked out, leaving them with the agreement, the evidence, and the choice. 48 hours passed in silence. When the deadline arrived, my parents did not ask to meet at their house. They requested a meeting in the hospital cafeteria, since Dad had been discharged but was waiting for final prescriptions. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. They were sitting at a small round table when Sterling and I arrived. Fallon was there too, wearing large sunglasses, scrolling through her phone. Looking bored? Mom and Dad did not look defeated, though. They looked oddly confident. Dad had a folder in front of him, not the one I gave him, but a new one. We are glad you came, Dad said, gesturing to the empty chairs. He did not stand up. Do you have the signed agreement? I asked, remaining standing. We have an agreement, Dad corrected, tapping the folder. A counteroffer. We have reviewed your terms, Penny, and frankly, they are draconian. We are willing to pay back the $80,000 over a 5-year period. But we will not be selling our home. That is non-negotiable. Mom nodded, crossing her arms. We are your parents, not your tenants. You cannot just order us to sell our property. And if you try to foreclose on the carriage house, we have spoken to a lawyer friend. He says we can tie this up in probate court for years. It is a family dispute. Judges hate these things. You will spend more on legal fees than the debt is worth. They stared at me, smug and self-assured. They thought they had called my bluff. They thought the worst I could do was a civil lawsuit. I looked at Sterling. He did not smile, but his eyes were dancing. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the cafeteria, chatter like a blade through silk. There is something we need to discuss before we talk about civil court. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. I placed it gently on top of Dad's counteroffer. Do you remember this? The quitclaim deed you had me sign. Mom frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Let me refresh your memory. I flipped it open. Line 37. Declared property value. $25,000. That is what you put down to avoid gift tax implications. Dad waved a hand dismissively. That is standard practice. Everyone does that. Everyone commits tax fraud. I tilted my head. Interesting defense strategy. It is not fraud, Dad scoffed. It is creative accounting. The IRS disagrees? I said. You see, the problem is that the carriage house is not worth $25,000. It never was. The market appraisal, the one I had done 3 months ago by a certified independent appraiser, values that historic property at $450,000. I let the number hang in the air. That is a $425,000 gap. I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, which constitutes major tax fraud under federal law. IRS Code Section 7201. Willful attempt to evade tax carries a penalty of up to 5 years in federal prison and fines up to $250,000 per person. The smugness evaporated from their faces instantly. Dad's hand froze on his folder. Fallon looked up from her phone, sunglasses sliding down her nose. You would not? Mom stammered. You threatened to tie me up in court for years, I said coldly. You thought this was a civil dispute about a debt. It is not. This is a criminal matter waiting to happen. Sterling stepped forward, his voice low and professional. Here is the reality facing you right now. If Penny proceeds with foreclosure, the deed becomes part of the public court record. The IRS monitors foreclosure filings for exactly this kind of discrepancy. They will audit you. They will find the fraud. And given the amount, they will prosecute. However, Sterling continued, if the settlement agreement Penny provided 2 days ago is signed unaltered, the lien is released. There is no foreclosure, no public filing. The deed remains internal. I slid my original agreement across the table, covering their pathetic counteroffer. So, I said, you have 2 choices. Option A, you stick to your counteroffer, I foreclose, and you explain to a federal judge why you lied about $425,000 in assets. Option B, you sign this. Right now. You sell your house, pay me back, and Fallon gets a job. Dad looked at the document, then at me. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. He realized, finally, that he was not negotiating with his daughter. He was negotiating with an auditor who had found the one error he could not hide. You would really send us to jail, he whispered. You would really rob me to fund her. I countered, pointing at Fallon. Sign the papers. Dad. He picked up the pen, his hand was shaking. He signed. Then he pushed it to Mom. She was crying silently, but she signed too. You are a monster, Fallon hissed. This is blackmail. No, Fallon. I said, taking the signed papers. Blackmail is illegal. This? This is just an audit. I checked the signatures. Perfect. You have 90 days to list the house. I told them, putting the folder back in my bag. And Fallon, start updating your resume. I hear Starbucks is hiring. I turned and walked out of the cafeteria. Sterling fell into step beside me. That went well, he murmured. It went exactly as calculated, I said. And for the first time in 18 months, I did not just feel free. I felt finished with the conversation. 2 months crawled by like years in reverse, as I watched the final phase of my plan unfold. I tracked everything with the obsessive precision that made me excellent at my job. The real estate agent's listing for my parents' home. Went live in week 1. Open houses in week 3, and multiple offers by week 5. Dad and Mom accepted a cash offer in week 7, $10,000 below asking. But they were desperate, and it showed. They needed the money to get out from under the weight of their own debt, and to meet my 90-day deadline. The closing happened on a gray Tuesday morning. At 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Wire transfer received. $80,000. I stared at that number for a long moment. $80,000. Every penny I had given them over a decade, returned in full. It should have felt like victory, the satisfaction of being repaid. Instead, it felt like the end of a chapter I had been trying to close for 18 months. The old, painful connection had been severed by a clean transaction. But the book was not finished yet. I picked up my phone and dialed Sterling. It's done. They paid. Congratulations, he said warmly. How do you feel? Like I have one more thing to do, I replied. I hung up and made my second call. This time to the foreclosure processing company I had hired 6 weeks ago. The Kingsley property on Heritage Lane. I instructed, my voice flat and businesslike. Proceed with eviction. Today. Fallon had exactly 0 days to be surprised. She had 2 months to find a job. 2 months to come up with the maintenance fees she should have been paying. 2 months to prove she was anything other than a parasite in designer yoga pants. She had done nothing but post increasingly unhinged social media rants about toxic family members and karmic justice. Well, karma had arrived, and she was dressed in a sheriff's uniform. I drove to the carriage house one last time, Sterling next to me, parking my Audi Q5 across the street where I could watch. The sheriff's vehicle was already there, along with a moving truck I had arranged. Professional. Efficient, merciless. The front door opened. I could hear Fallon before I could see her. You cannot do this! This is my house! My sanctuary! The sheriff, A patient-looking woman in her 50s held up the eviction notice. "Ma'am, this is a legal foreclosure. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items. Everything else stays."
No, no!
Fallon's voice climbed to a shriek. "Call my sister! She cannot do this! Mom and Dad already paid her back?" Everything. I stepped out of my car and walked toward them slowly, deliberately. Fallon's eyes locked onto me, and the expression on her face was somewhere between betrayal and pure rage. "You." She lunged forward, but the sheriff blocked her with one arm. "You evil witch! They paid you everything! Everything!" I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at my sister. My baby sister, who I had once protected from bullies in middle school. "That money," I said calmly, letting the words carry clearly across the quiet street, "paid for your parents' past. This house pays for your laziness." "What are you even talking about?" Fallon screamed. "I needed time to build my brand. You knew that. Everyone knew that. You had 18 months, I replied. You could have gotten a job, any job. Minimum wage at a coffee shop would have covered the maintenance fees. But you did not. You threw parties and posted pictures and lived in my house like you owned it."
It was mine! They gave it to me?
"No," I corrected. "They tried to. But they never actually owned it, did they? Not free and clear. And when they could not pay the fines, the city took priority. And when I bought that debt, I took priority. You are not being evicted from your sanctuary, Fallon. You are being evicted from mine." The sheriff gestured to her deputy. "Madam, your time's up. Let's go." "This is not over?" Fallon shrieked as they escorted her down the steps. "I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. I'll tell everyone what you did." "Please do," I said pleasantly. "I'm sure your 73 Instagram followers will be devastated." She tried to lunge at me again, but the deputies had her, walking her firmly toward the street where a taxi was waiting, also arranged by me. I was not completely heartless. She would not be homeless. She would just be Mom and Dad's problem, in their tiny rental apartment. The thought made me smile. When the taxi pulled away, Fallon's face was pressed against the window, still screaming. I turned to the sheriff. "Thank you for your professionalism." "Just doing my job." "Ma'am." She handed me the keys. "Property's yours now. All legal." I climbed the steps and pushed open the door. The carriage house was exactly as I remembered it. And nothing like it at all. The red brick walls still stood strong. But the air inside smelled of stale beer and neglect. It was empty. Completely, utterly empty. My footsteps echoed as I walked through the rooms. The victory was complete. My footsteps echoed as I walked through the rooms of the carriage house. The place was hollowed out. The oak floors scuffed and scratched from furniture being dragged out and from 18 months of reckless parties. I walked into what Fallon had designated her yoga sanctuary, the room that had once been my grandmother's library. It was here that she had envisioned her healing journey, a journey funded entirely by negligence. I stopped in the center of that empty room and set down the box I had been carrying from my car. The blender. I lifted it out carefully. It was the same dirty blender from 18 months ago. I had kept it in a box in my storage unit, the coffee and dried honey residue still clinging to the cord and the plastic pitcher. The cardboard was creased and the plastic dull. It was the physical embodiment of their dismissal. I placed it in the exact center of the oak floor, ensuring it was visible from every corner. Then I plugged it into the nearest wall outlet. The cord reached with an inch to spare. I took a breath, holding the moment. This was the ceremonial close. This was the silent, symbolic scream I had held inside for decades. I turned the dial to high. The sound tore through the empty house like a scream, like a laugh, like a final, ridiculous reckoning. It was deafening. The motor whined, protesting the lack of liquid, vibrating against the smooth oak floor. It echoed off the exposed brick walls, bounced across the hardwood, filling every corner of every room with its piercing, absurd roar. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I stood there for a moment, watching the blender shake against the floor, listening to it utterly destroy the sanctity of Fallon's precious sanctuary. It was noise for the sake of noise, consequence for the sake of balance. The antithesis of the quiet accommodation I had practiced my entire life. I did not turn it off. I turned and walked out, closing the door behind me, sealing the horrible, piercing, continuous roar inside the red brick walls. The sound, muffled but still insistent, followed me down the porch steps. Sterling was waiting by my car, leaning against the hood with his arms crossed. He had heard the noise, of course, and his eyes were wide with a mix of surprise and understanding. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly, as the whine of the motor became fainter with distance. "Like I have one more thing to do," I said. I had already sold the house. The architect who had bought it from me had paid $20,000 above asking. She had been thrilled at the opportunity, already drawn up plans to restore it to its former glory. The carriage house would be beautiful again. Just not for Fallon. I pulled the "sold" sign from my trunk, the realtor's sign I had requested specifically, and walked to the wrought iron gate. I hung the sign, making sure it was perfectly centered, perfectly visible. The process was complete. I got in my car. Sterling slid into the passenger seat. "Where to?" he asked. I started the engine, looking at the historic red brick house one last time. Behind those walls, a dirty blender was still screaming on an empty floor. The sound of everything they had given me, everything they had taken, and everything they had never understood. "Home," I said. "Home," I said. The physical act of revenge was done. The financial settlement was done. But the ethical duty, the professional obligation remained. The final audit was still due. We drove away, leaving the screaming blender and the sight of the newly hung, "sold" sign behind us. The air in the car was quiet. The silence a peaceful contrast to the chaos of the last few hours. The physical act of taking the house and getting my money back was complete, but my analytical mind knew the ledger still needed balancing. "You said you had one more thing to do," Sterling prompted gently. I pulled out my phone and opened a new email. The recipient field automatically populated, tips@irs.gov. "Penny," Sterling said carefully, leaning forward slightly. "You do not have to. You won. They are out of your life. The agreement is signed." "Yes, I do have to," I replied, my fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Professional ethics will not let me ignore it. $450,000 versus $25,000. That is not a rounding error. That is deliberate fraud. I started typing. I knew the process. I had helped the government track down this exact kind of scheme before. My duty as a forensic accountant was to report discrepancies, not cover them up. I paused for a moment, thinking about the settlement agreement in Sterling's briefcase. We had promised to release the lion on the house. We had promised not to sue for the $80,000. We never promised to hide a felony. They had assumed my silence on the tax fraud was part of the purchase price, a bonus for their cooperation. They forgot that I am an auditor. I attached scanned copies of the quitclaim deed, the independent appraisal, and the property records. Everything documented, everything provable. Subject: anonymous tip, property valuation fraud. I read aloud as I typed the final description. I am writing to report a significant discrepancy in declared property value concerning the transfer of a historic district asset. Sterling sighed, but he did not stop me. He understood. This was not about personal revenge anymore, it was about principle. It was the final boundary, a line drawn between their messy entitlement and my professional integrity. I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void, carrying with it the last connection I had to Royce and Marcella Kingsley. Let the federal government deal with them now. I was done. It is over, I said, putting my phone down and resting my hand on Sterling's arm. The trembling was gone. What happens to them now? He asked. Consequences, I repeated, the word feeling clean and definitive. The kind they cannot pay off, bargain away, or blame on a nervous breakdown. It is the consequence of challenging a system, or an auditor, who remembers everything. We drove toward our penthouse, toward the skyline that looked like victory. I had fought to save my parents and sister my whole life, but in the end, I had only managed to save myself. I traded a messy, toxic family for peace, self-respect, and $80,000 in overdue debt. I looked at Sterling, who was smiling, and smiled back. For the first time, my strength felt like a tool for my own freedom, not a burden for their use. I was finally truly free.